Well, we have 20 days remaining until 49ers training camp. The 4th of July is behind us, and that means that football season can start hitting its stride, or at least the run up to football season can start hitting its stride on this channel. We will hit our stride. We'll be at full sprint by July 25th, which is when 49ers veterans will report to training camp. July 18th, the week before that, is when 49ers rookies will report to camp. So anyway, to hit full stride, I'm going to launch a series here called 20 in 20 days. This is going to be the countdown, and we're going to have 20 thoughts over the course of the 20 days until the 49ers begin training camp. And the first thought's going to be about somebody that I talked about on the 4th, and that is Javon Hargrave. We can talk about his impact. First, why don't we talk about where the 49ers defense was last year? This is EPA per play, expected points added per play, or in the term of a defense, expected points taken away per play. So negative numbers further into the negative, under zero, are better. And the 49ers defense, we all know that it was the number one unit in the NFL last season. Look at the gap between the 49ers and everyone else. 49ers, negative 0.112 EPA per play. Dallas, back there, negative 0.087. You could see how over several plays, and a defense is on the field for about 50 to 80 plays per game. 80 is probably going to be a little bit too much. That means that your defense is struggling, and so is your offense. If you can be on the field for 50 plays per game, though, that's going to be a healthy amount for a defense. Multiply this gap by 50, and that's how many more points effective the 49ers defense is than number two. And that adds up to probably a couple points here over number two, over the Dallas Cowboys. We know that in the NFL, where margins are tiny, that is a significant edge for the 49ers. So anyway, the 49ers were already number one last season, and that was with a big weakness at defensive tackle. DT was a vacuum, a black hole in this defense. So what did the 49ers do? They went out and they acquired the best free agent at the position. This was Javon Hargrave's impact last year, at least one measurement of it. Now, let's be 100% honest here. This is not going to be a foolproof measurement. This is EPA plus minus. So this means, what is a defense's expected points added score when a defender is on the field versus when he is off of it? And the biggest difference of those scores regarding individual defenders and their plus minus is listed here. So the top impact player, according to this metric, is Carolina's Derek Brown. The Panthers defense was 0.26 EPA better when Derek Brown was on the field versus when he was off of it. Javon Hargrave, the new 49er, he ranked number 2 in the entire NFL, ahead of TJ Watt, Cameron Hayward, his teammate Fletcher Cox, Bobby Okereke from the Indianapolis Colts. There's Micah Parsons. I mean, there's a lot of good names on this list. Javon Hargrave is number 2. Yesterday, I talked about the straw that stirred the drink for the Eagles defense. Well, I think it's fair to say that Javon Hargrave was the straw that stirred the drink, or one of the straws that stirred the drink for the Eagles. Now, despite the fact that there are some potential caveats here, some potential asterisks to this stat, such as the fact that EPA per play is bound to be lower on running downs than it is on passing downs. So defensive tackles have a better chance to score higher if they come off the field on passing downs. That being said, Javon Hargrave didn't come off the field on all too many passing downs, so maybe that asterisk isn't as strong as it should be. But the point is that there can be noise in this stat, but even though there is noise in this stat, it's better to rank higher in it, number 2 in the league, than it is to rank lower down in the stat. And the 49ers are picking up a player that, if you turned on the tape for the Philadelphia Eagles last year, clearly set the table for the edge rushers. Because there was so much attention paid to Javon Hargrave, you had players like Josh Sweat, players like Hassan Reddick roaring off the edge and facing a whole lot more either single teams or a whole lot more distracted blockers than if Javon Hargrave didn't exist. And Hargrave did much more than just distract blockers. He had over 11 sacks himself. His past 2 seasons have been monstrous. His pass rushing productivity scores have been just behind those, or at least in 2021, just behind those of Aaron Donald. In 2022, they're better than those of Aaron Donald. Donald had some injuries to deal with last year, didn't have the best season. So maybe Chris Jones was the best interior pass rusher in football, but there you had Javon Hargrave right behind him. So the question is, what's Javon Hargrave's impact going to be on the 49ers? Because his impact on the Philadelphia Eagles last season was outsized. You could see it here with this number 2 ranking in EPA plus minus. So we have to say, with Javon Hargrave in tow, is that 49ers defense, which already ranked number 1 last season, going to increase its lead? Is it going to be number 1 by an even wider margin in 2023? Well, one of the main questions is, how much better can Nick Bosa be for the 49ers? As you can see here, they have surrounded Nick Bosa with a lot of help in the form of defensive line investments. 27.7% of the 49ers budget is going to that defensive line. That number has increased because of the investment in Javon Hargrave. And if you look at the rankings, the 49ers right here, that is the number 1 expenditure level on the D-line in all of football. So we ask Nick about Nick Bosa because Nick Bosa is up for a new contract. Nick Bosa was in many ways the straw that stirred the drink for the 49ers defense last year. 18.5 sacks, defensive player of the year, but he did it without defensive tackle support, or at least quality defensive tackle support. I mean, it was a rotating cast of characters on the inside for the 49ers last year. Eric Armstead was hurt for much of the season. So was Javon Kinlaw. Beyond that, yeah, Kevin Givens is a nice rotational player. He did some good stuff last year, but let's not pretend like the 49ers had star power on the inside to help Bosa out. This season, they should have that star power. So the question is, how good can Bosa be with Javon Hargrave on the inside? And I think a lot of that will be answered by how good is the edge rushing position opposite of Nick Bosa, because the 49ers have some depth to replace along the defensive line. It's not like they have gotten out of this offseason scot-free and returned everybody and added Javon Hargrave. They have lost Charles Omenihu, who was a valuable defensive lineman last year. They have lost Sansom Ebukam. They have lost Jordan Willis. There's considerable depth to replace, and this is why we're talking so much about Drake Jackson. But I'll tell you what, Drake Jackson is going to be in the best possible position to succeed that there is, because he's going to have Nick Bosa on the other end drawing blockers. He's going to have Javon Hargrave in the middle drawing blockers. Presumably, Eric Armstead is going to be healthy. He's going to be drawing attention. So if there's a time for Drake Jackson to bulk up and succeed, it is now, because that opportunity and that window will never be bigger for him. If Jackson does deliver, and if some of the other 49ers depth does come through, you have Cleveland Farrell now, Austin Bryant now on that defensive line, also a Clemson product that they signed in free agency this offseason. You've got Robert Beal Jr., right, out of Georgia, the edge rusher who's just been awesome as far as his athletic testing goes. If one or many of these pieces pan out in very targeted specific roles, which is how the 49ers like to plug in their new players, this team is going to be in business. You need that counterbalance to Nick Bosa because you already have Javon Hargrave in the middle. So that's the biggest question about this defense. It's served up on a platter for the taking. For whoever wants to be that counterbalance to Nick Bosa, there are several names. Drake Jackson headlines those names. Whoever can get that job done, and that job will never be more open because of the other star power on that defensive line. But whoever does seize that job and executes it well can send this 49ers defense into the absolute stratosphere. And by the absolute stratosphere, I'll bring this back up onto the screen. You could see how highly the 49ers were ranked last year, how big of a gap there was between number 1 and number 2. Well, the key is to expand that gap this season. On top of the fact that the 49ers can have a better pass rush this year, I also think that their coverage can be better because they have a new defensive coordinator in Steve Wilks who's going to be focusing on the back end. And Talanoa Hufanga should only be a year more experienced, and he played his best football down the stretch of last season. You also have Jair Brown added to the secondary. He's going to be a rookie, but he doesn't have to start right away. So that's going to be a situation where Tashawn Gibson has to show him the ropes, and maybe the 49ers can add some coverage adaptability with a third safety. Isaiah Oliver, I mean, Jimmy Ward is a really good player, but Jimmy Ward was also tossed around positions throughout his entire time with the 49ers. Safety was his best one. He had to play nickel last year. It was a growing experience for Jimmy Ward. Now you've got a true nickel and a big nickel in there, and Isaiah Oliver. How will he fit in with Steve Wilks' diversified defense? And then you talk about peaking at the right time. Diamond Lenore saved his best football for last in the 2022 season. Does he carry it over into 2023? You see, and you talk about concerns. I think it's cornerback depth, and it's that defensive end position. Third linebacker, I'm not all too concerned about, even though the 49ers lost Azeez Al-Shire, because that third linebacker spot can be filled with a third safety. It can be filled with a nickelback, and it can be filled with one of the 49ers' many promising linebacker prospects that they've added through either the draft or undrafted free agency in the past 2 years. D. Winters, Jalen Graham out of Purdue. They're thinking he might be a Fred Warner clone just with that height, 6'3", that ability to cover at Purdue. He played a glorified linebacker position with DB responsibilities. D. Winters, instinctive linebacker out of TCU. And Marcelino McCrary-Ball, a player who became very popular in the 49ers locker room last year on the practice squad. He's going to be a competitor there. So you might have the best linebacker core in football. I think the 49ers do. You might have the best defensive line in football. And then you have a secondary that's really, really set up to cost efficiently work with that front seven. Along those lines, I present to you this, because I talked about this in my 49ers cost allocation piece the other day. Look how little the 49ers are spending on the defensive backfield. I should remove my face from this. Why did that get so small? There we go. That's a little bit bigger. And here we go. I want to make this a little bit wider for you guys so you could see the 49ers defensive backs. 23.1 million. They rank number 31 in the NFL. So you talk about a cost-efficient DB room. They're spending the same amount of money as they spent last season on DBs. It was 23.6 million. But last year it ranked number 13. So the league spent a ton on DBs this offseason. The 49ers didn't follow the trend because they believe they have the best front seven, DL, and linebackers in football. And they believe that Charvarius Ward, Talanoa Hufanga, Jair Brown, Diamond Lenore, Isaiah Oliver, Tashawn Gibson, they believe that all these players are going to mesh really well with that front seven. And they found that they can, or at least they believe that they can cost efficiently run a secondary without massive overinvestment, given that front seven and how the rush and coverage tied together. So that's what the 49ers defense is looking at. I know that I was talking about Javon Hargrave's impact in particular, but it's all connected. It's all tied together. And I think he's going to have a big impact. That's why the 49ers paid him so much. You know, Jed York went up to John Lynch and said, you could spend what you want to spend on a big-time defensive star, but he better have an impact. This better not just be a guy. This needs to be somebody who moves the needle. And I think when we looked at the list of available free agents entering this offseason, we said, ooh, Javon Hargrave, that'd be an impact player. But will the 49ers really fork out all that money to bring him in? Because he's going to be expensive. And I think, you know, a lot of us, myself included, maybe even most of us or all of us said, no, the 49ers probably won't go that high up on the list. They'll probably get a nice defensive tackle. But will they go for the A-list guy? And they decided they were going to go for the A-list guy. They decided to pay Javon Hargrave because they wanted to make sure they got a true impact player who would move the needle. And there's nothing that illustrates Hargrave's true impact status better than this numerically so far. Number 2 in EPA plus minus last season. All right, time for some questions. 49ers Q&A. Grab me some water. Rob has a question. Any news on when Bosa will get his new deal? It's going to be a deadline pressure thing, and it's 20 days to training camp. This is 20 and 20. So I would say in about 20 days, I would expect Nick Bosa to get his deal. Drake won't see a double team all year. Like I said, dinner is served for Drake Jackson. It is time for him to eat. Is it morning in Thailand? We have somebody watching in Thailand. What time is it in Thailand? Let me look it up. Thailand time. It is 4:54 a.m. in Thailand. So whoever's watching in Thailand, thank you for waking up early. Other side of the international date line. Who do we think will have more sacks this year, Drake or Hargrave? Well, Hargrave had 11 last year. It's be a hell of a year for Drake Jackson if he exceeded Hargrave's total from last year. I don't know how many Hargrave is going to have this season. How many is Bosa going to have this season? How many will the 49ers have total? Will they exceed the amount of sacks they had in 2019, which I think was in the 60s, right? Oh, they only had 48 in 2019. Crazy. I think they're on pace for about 60, but they ran out of gas when guys got hurt in December. So will the 49ers be over or under 50 sacks? 48 was the total in 2019. I think they'll be over 50 if they stay healthy. Again, so much of this obviously is health dependent. So I'm going to be watching the Eagles really closely because this is what happened to the 49ers whenever, I mean, they've made deep runs at not every year, but in most of the years recently, 3 out of the past 4 seasons, either the NFC Championship game or the Super Bowl. I think that's really, really correlated with the 49ers injury rate. When you're playing 20 game seasons, you have less rest time and you wore out your body more than most of your competition, you're more likely to see guys deal with injuries the following year, right? So that's part of the price that you pay for being good in the NFL. That's how parity works. That's how it drags with its gravitational pull. It drags excellent teams back toward the mean. So I'm going to be watching the Eagles really closely this year. Can they be injury free or relatively injury free the year after playing 20 games? Same amount as the 49ers. The Eagles had a bye last year and the 49ers didn't. That's going to be a big question in that arms race atop the NFC. Go ahead and ask your questions. How much improvement, if any, should the 49ers expect from Talanoa Hufanga and Eric Armstead as a pass rusher? Well, Talanoa Hufanga is interesting. I tweeted about him the other day. His missed tackle rate over the first 8 or 9 games was really high. It was like 13%. And he dropped that to about 5% over the course of the last 12 games. So we saw Talanoa Hufanga take that jump to an all-pro caliber player over the back half of last season. Still gave up some big plays, bit a little bit on play action against the Raiders there. But in general, this 49ers defense was number 1 in the NFL with Talanoa Hufanga as its safety for a reason. He was disciplined. He was simultaneously a missile, and he started tackling well enough toward the end of the year. He could still tackle better. He can still be a little bit better in discipline against play action. That's all the stuff that you would expect the player to get better at in his 3rd season. On top of that, Steve Wilks is also a highly respected coach of defensive backs. So we'll see what kind of imprint Steve Wilks has on Talanoa Hufanga. So I would expect some improvement for him, yes, because he's a player with his head on straight, and he has shown a good, promising trajectory over his first 2 years. Now, Eric Armstead, I'd expect a lot of improvement. He didn't have a sack last year, and he was hurt for over 50% of the season. So for Armstead, the key is health, because we've seen him explode in the past for the 49ers. Really talented player, needs to stay healthy. Troublesome foot injury for Eric Armstead last year. Who do the 49ers have to fill Mike McGlinchey's spot? That is Colton McKivitz. That is another big question mark, this one on the offensive side. You've got 2 homegrown prospects who the 49ers are really entrusting the exterior lines to. On the defensive side, Drake Jackson. On the offensive side, Colton McKivitz. And, you know, when you start spending so much money on star players, and the 49ers this is their spending division, it's a lot of money spent on star players, $10 million in cap space open right now. At some point, you're going to need to stay sustainable. You're going to need homegrown, cheaper players to come through. And for the 49ers, that moment of truth is this offseason. Colton McKivitz, Drake Jackson, those are the 2 headlining names in that effort. Who will be QB1 if Purdy isn't ready week 1? I have no idea. And I don't think that the 49ers have determined this yet either. This will be determined over training camp. It's either going to be Trey Lance or Sam Darnold. I don't think it's going to be Brandon Allen. But the 49ers will have an honest, open competition. That's all that you can ask for as an NFL team for QB2. And I think that they have a couple really capable options that are going to be tossing their names into the ring for this job. No, I don't think the 49ers are going to move on from a talented running back in Elijah Mitchell. He's really damn good when he's healthy. He's going to need a little bit better health luck. He's going to need to show that he can stay healthy, but that's a nice luxury to have behind Christian McCaffrey. Speaking of the running back room, don't forget Deebo Samuel. I'm going to do a video on him a little bit later. He's running at like 18.4, 18.6 miles an hour on the treadmill. Deebo looks motivated. Deebo looks a little bit lighter. Looks like he might be in shape. And if he comes in as motivated as he was in 2021, it's going to be hard to stop the combination of McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel. Will we see Deebo at pre-contract levels? That's the question, right? That absolutely is the question. Mike sent me that video of Deebo Samuel. Maybe I could play it right now on that treadmill. Going to download it really quickly. Going to open it up for you. Let's take a look. You guys can judge for yourselves on what Deebo Samuel looks like right now. Here he is. Get up, get up, get up, get up. Deebo Samuel, 18.6 miles an hour on the treadmill. Now, you have to remember this guy is 220 plus pounds. So when he starts moving at those speeds, this is why opponents don't want to tackle him. This is why there's not a lot of interest in tackling Deebo Samuel. Yes, I know that there are some players who can hit 19, maybe even some super fast guys that hit in the 20s, but none of them are built like beer trucks. And Deebo Samuel is built like a big rig. So you combine that speed with that size, and you have something that's very intimidating and very hard to bring down. So we'll see if Deebo Samuel does hit those 2021 levels. He acknowledged being distracted by the whole contract circus last year. So good on Deebo Samuel for identifying the issue, got caught up in some of that hoopla. Let's see if he's able to fix that entering this 2023 season. As Waveware says, if so, watch out. Can I speak on how the addition of Hargrave helps Kinlaw? That's a great question. And that's something I wanted to get to, but I totally forgot. So thank you for reminding me. Let me open this up. By the way, we just got our apartment in San Francisco for the season. I'm very excited. It's going to be another fun fun football season in the city. I'm not in San Francisco right now, as you can tell. Studio is going to be in San Francisco, though, unless I'm occasionally here in Nashville for a couple days here and there during the season. But maybe I'll see you around town. Anyway, the question is, can I speak on how the addition of Hargrave helps Javon Kinlaw? And that's exactly what this is for right here. Here's your 49ers depth chart and roster. I'm going to zoom in on the defensive line. I'm going to highlight the defensive line. You could see it right here. So your front line is Bosa, Armstead, Hargrave, and Drake Jackson. Last year, Javon Kinlaw would have been right here. He would have been in Hargrave's spot. Instead, Kinlaw is going to be a second stringer. And I think that in and of itself takes a lot of pressure off of Javon Kinlaw. And I think the one thing you want to do for somebody who's struggled with knee issues essentially ever since he set foot into the NFL is take some pressure off of him. Take a snap load off of him. And, it's physical pressure that he take off of Javon Kinlaw too, but also some psychological pressure comes off. He's in a contract year, and he could just let it rip now. And he could let it rip with fresher legs against a defensive line that might be exhaling a bit whenever Javon Hargrave comes off the field, or even with Javon Hargrave. I'm sure there'll be some defensive rotations with Javon and Javon. It's Javon Kinlaw and Javon Hargrave. So I think that just by making him a rotational player instead of a featured defensive tackle, you give Javon Kinlaw a better platform for success. Hopefully that answers your question. You heard online the 49ers will trade Sam Darnold, that they'll pump and dump him. Do you think they'd trade him before week 1? So just because you heard a rumor online that somebody's speculating and somebody with no knowledge doesn't mean that it's true. Now, even a broken clock is going to be right twice a day. Teams trade players, teams release players. So who knows? Maybe that's the way that this all breaks, right? Maybe that's the way the dominoes end up falling. But what I can tell you right now is the 49ers don't know what they're going to do. Any competent franchise doesn't know what they're going to do because you wait until you get information to decide your course of action. The information the 49ers need right now is, do they like Sam Darnold better or do they like Trey Lance better for QB2? They're going to learn that through training camp. That is what training camp is for. Does one of the quarterbacks become expendable after training camp if Brock Purdy is healthy and if the second quarterback has truly proven himself? Perhaps, but even then, the 49ers will be in the position where they ran out of QBs last year, and I think they're a stronger team if they carry as many quarterbacks as possible this season. So again, a lot of people make stuff up to get clicks on the internet. They have no knowledge of what the 49ers actually want to do. And the reason I know this is because, well, I like to consider myself connected, but I also like to consider myself a good critical thinker. And we see what the 49ers are doing strategically based on a reaction to what went wrong last year. What went wrong last year is they ran out of QBs against Philadelphia in the NFC title game. The reaction to that has been stockpiling the QB room. So you're really not going to give guys away for free, right? And you're definitely not going to do it before you have a full intelligence report on what you have in the building. That report is going to be collected over training camp. Well, that's what this video is about. What about the addition of Hargrave helping Drake Jackson? You can rewind to the start of this video. Hargrave is going to eat up blockers, right? Nick Bosa is going to eat up blockers. Drake Jackson shouldn't face a double team all season long. Do you think Purdy might play in the last preseason game since he should be fully cleared by then? I have no idea how Shanahan's going to approach the preseason this year. Listen, if Purdy is healthy and Shanahan thinks he needs a preseason game, he might play a few snaps. Also, really good chance Shanahan thinks that Purdy won't need that preseason game. I don't know. They thought that Jimmy Garoppolo needed some preseason time in 2019 after he missed almost all of 2018 with a torn ACL, but that could be a totally different situation. I won't know until the situation actually presents itself. That's the $1 million question, or maybe the $5 million question. Do the 49ers need another edge rusher? If Drake Jackson steps up, no. If Cleveland Farrell steps up, no. If Austin Bryant steps up, no. If Robert Beal Jr. steps up, no. There are a lot of options already on this roster. We'll see if they're legitimate. Any more questions? Let's hear them now. Jordan Mason versus Elijah Mitchell. Well, if Elijah Mitchell stays healthy, I think he's a more complete back than Jordan Mason. I think Jordan Mason has a very dedicated role on this football team, assuming everybody is healthy, and that's as the closer or the finisher, right? You toss in the 225-pounder a little bit later in the game after the defenses are tired, when people are already bruised, fresh legs, big body, bruiser. Jordan Mason sealed some football games for the 49ers last year. Elijah Mitchell, meanwhile, I mean, he's a little bit more of an all-around back. So when he's fully healthy, if you want me to slot running backs in RB1, RB2, I think he's running back 2. That being said, Mitchell's proven to be less durable than Jordan Mason so far. So maybe by default, Jordan Mason climbs up that pecking order. Marcelino McCrary-Ball's got a decent shot. It's him. It's going to be Jalen Graham. It's going to be D. Winters competing for linebacker 3. You've got veterans in that room like Warren Burks, right? Like Demetrius Flanagan-Foles. But those are mainly special teams guys. The 49ers would like a dedicated linebacker to take over Azeez Al-Shire's number 3 role. I like McCrary-Ball, but there is stiff competition. D. Winters, instinctive player, I said. I mean, this guy had, 10 sacks or 10 tackles for loss last year for TCU, despite the fact that he wasn't blitzing. So he knows how to fire gaps. We'll see if that instinctiveness translates to the NFL. And I talked about Jalen Graham's ability to cover. It's really good. 6'3", long strides, good coverage IQ out of Purdue. I don't think anybody really exciting still available to pick up a right tackle. Tom Compton might be out there. Tom Compton, we know who he is. A good run blocker, but a really poor pass blocker. Maybe the 49ers picking him up for tackle depth just to insulate themselves a little bit. But Colton McKivitz is the man that they're counting on. Jalen Moore might be able to prove something in training camp. Matt Pryor is the veteran swing tackle pickup that they signed this offseason. Leroy Watson's the developmental guy who used to be a tight end, who's added a lot of weight, may still be a year away. But it is bare bones out on that free agent market because if you're a good tackle, a team has probably already picked you up. Is Oliver a lock for slot cornerback, or is not Womack, is Womack going to get a chance to slide over? I mean, everybody's going to have a chance, right? Nobody's big money in that competition. Oliver's a veteran contract, but his cap hit's only like $1 million or $2 million this season. So Samuel Womack will have a chance to prove that he can get a starting position. That's what competition's all about. But I would put Isaiah Oliver as the heavy favorite there at the moment. He was really good at slot corner for Atlanta last year. Yeah, Oren Burks. I would put Oren Burks as the third linebacker right now. It's the young guys have to prove themselves first. So Oren Burks gives you a nice floor as the third linebacker, but I think there's a higher ceiling there with one of the rookies reaching his potential because Oren Burks, his primary strength is as a special teams player. All right, went for a good 30 minutes. We'll do another show a little bit later today, so stay tuned. Subscribe, hit that little alarm button, notification bell so that you're part of this. And go ahead and hit that like button, comment, help out the channel. Give us some momentum heading into the season. 20 shows in 20 days. There's going to be more than 20, but this is part of our 20 and 20 series. 20 days out of training camp. So your homework right now, hit the like, comment, and obviously subscribe, and maybe even hit that notification bell. Do all 4 of those things right now. 2 thumbs up. All right. Talk to everybody soon.